Good evening and welcome from Vienna Alsergrund, the seminar room of the Institute for the Danube Region in Central Europe. I am Sebastian Schäfer, the director of this institute, and I would like to welcome you all here in the room, but also in the virtual space, to the IDM Conference, formerly known as Danube Conference, formerly known as EUSDR Conference. We have gathered today under the motto Cooperation and Integration in the Danube Region. And the date is not a coincidence because it is actually the founding date of IDM. Today we turn 71 years old. And those of you who remember last year, we had a very ambitious program, and we are always very ambitious. And this year, our ambitious program was to present an exhibition on the rich history of the IDM. And we have hanged this exhibition actually a bit more than 24 hours ago. So we made it. And I would like to thank especially Malvina Talik, Rebecca Thorn, Julia Mitz, and Hannah Obermüller, who have made this possible, that you can see on the wall this wonderful exhibition. Big round of applause for the effort. For the ones that join us online and can't see it, don't worry, we will have a vernissage in January, and then hopefully you can join us here. But we have a rich program with a lot of fantastic speakers and fantastic points. So without further ado, I now ask the chairman of the IDM, Rector Friedrich Faulhammer, for his greeting words. Please.
Dear Vice Chair of the IDM, Rudolf Schicker, dear board members of the IDM, dear members of the IDM, dear guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As the chairman of the IDM, it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome you here at the IDM and in the virtual space, the already mentioned virtual space, to this year's IDM conference. And I'm really delighted that the participants of today's and tomorrow's Young Scholars Forum are joining the IDM conference as well. The topic of their forum fits in neatly with our conference, as it is focusing on regions as drivers of European integration. As Sebastian already mentioned, exactly 1 year ago today, the IDM celebrated its 70th anniversary at Pali, Niederösterreich. And during that year, last year, in addition to our regular program, we, together with the whole team of the IDM, organized an event in each of our 19 target countries, bringing together a total of 70 events implemented or co-organized by the IDM. So while last year was exceptional due to our ambitious anniversary program, this year has been no less eventful or busy, with nearly 60 events, including highlights such as a high-level discussion ahead of the EU elections, the Danube Salon on the MS Dürnstein during the Europa Forum Wachau, and the annual conference of the DRC 2 weeks ago in Krems. Furthermore, in 2024, the IDM started a new event series in honor of our long-standing chairman, the Erhard Busek Ambassador Talks. Perhaps you have taken part in some of these events, and if not, most of them can be rewatched on our YouTube channel. So you are kindly invited to take a look. In 2024, we continued many successful collaborations, event series, and publications, while also launching new partnerships and projects. Throughout the year, we worked to create synergies, expand our network, and promote regional cooperation. This conference tonight stands as the best proof and expression of these efforts in this year. Today, we are pleased to present a new IDM project, Central Europe and future European Union enlargement, financed by the International Visegrad Fund. 4 of the 6 project partners from the region were already involved in last year's anniversary activities, and we are delighted to have continued and deepened our collaboration through this project, as well as establishing valuable new partnerships. The project aims to create a network of think tanks and experts from across the region who will identify key similarities and differences among the EU candidate countries, fostering mutual learning from each other and the establishment of best practices. In that way, the project highlights IDM's unique expertise as one of the few think tanks focusing on both the integration of the Western Balkans as well as Ukraine and Moldova. Tonight, we will also turn our attention to Austria as the country reaches the end of its presidency of the EUSDR. We will reflect on a year of transition in the Danube region and explore the role the EUSDR can play in the EU integration process. And to conclude the evening, and in collaboration with our long-standing partner, the ARGE Donauländer, we will hear about their activities in the region and their vision for the future. So, as you can see, we have prepared a diverse program tonight, full of insightful discussions and expert perspectives. I want to use this opportunity to also thank all the speakers, project partners, and the IDM team who have made this event possible. And special thanks goes to all participants for joining us tonight, and I wish us a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these opening words. And the mentioned program that we are implementing is presented by the coordinator of this project and research associate at IDM, Rebecca Thorne. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening also from me. I'm happy to see the room so full. And I'm very happy to present our new project, which is generously supported by the International Visegrad Fund. So before I tell you a bit more about the context and the activities that we have planned, I would like to share the promotional video of the Visegrad Fund with you. Wait one moment. Having difficulties. Yes.
Yeah, this is, I don't know why this bar at the bottom.
So exit to full screen first. Yeah.
No. Just keep you in suspense. It's a fantastic video, and it's in this way.
And the Oscar goes to.
All right.
Share it again. You can't open it.
So what we are going to do is I will sort this out. You present the project, and then we show it after your project presentation.
Yeah, let's do it like that. So I'm very sorry about that, but let's continue. So first, thank you to the Visegrad Fund again. And as part of the project, we'll be working with a number of think tanks from across the region. So with the European Policy Center from Belgrade, with the Institute for Public Affairs from Bratislava, the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs from Budapest, the Ukrainian Institute for International Politics from Kiev, the Association for International Affairs from Prague, and the Institute of Public Affairs from Warsaw. And I'm delighted that 3 of our 6 partners can be with us here in person tonight. So at the IDM, one of the key questions that we are dealing with is how to improve the processes of EU enlargement and integration, both for the Western Balkans and Ukraine. And in the summer, we published a policy paper on why the next European Commission should prioritize EU enlargement and reform. And if you haven't read it already, I can highly recommend it. You can pick it up on your way out. So as part of the policy paper, the authors, Sebastian Scheffer and Francesco Danieli, who is also here tonight as part of the Young Scholars Forum, they created a chart, which I will share with you now. So they created this chart to show how long the EU accession negotiations took in months for all the respective candidate countries. So ironically, the shortest was for the United Kingdom, but the longest was for Portugal, 77 months. So it took 77 months of negotiations for Portugal to join the EU. But if we were to add the Western Balkans to this chart, and you'll have to use your imagination for that, the picture would completely change. So Montenegro was the first in the region to start membership negotiations in 2012, followed by Serbia in 2014. That's 150 months for Montenegro. So you can imagine it changes it quite a lot, and 131 months for Serbia as of today, and counting. Albania and North Macedonia have now also started negotiations in 2022, and Ukraine and Moldova have now also joined the queue. With such a lengthy waiting game, it's hardly surprising that opinion polls on the respective countries' European futures are rather mixed. So this is a poll conducted by the Center for Insights in Serbia Research at the International Republic Institute. And it shows, so this question was, if a referendum were held today on our country joining the European Union, how would you vote? So Albania is at the top, 92% would vote yes. Then Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, and Serbia, less than half the population. They're a little less enthusiastic about joining the bloc. Another question asked whether the European Union is serious in its intention to offer membership to Western Balkan countries. So here Kosovo is the most confident, followed by Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Serbia again somewhat skeptical. So for Ukraine, it's a slightly different question. How long do you think it will take for Ukraine to become an EU member? And there's a considerable amount of confidence in this, in Ukraine's future in the EU. So 26%, around a quarter, think that it will take less than 3 years, and around a third think it will take 3 to 5 years. Only 3% think that Ukraine will not join the EU. So it's a big difference in attitudes between Serbia and Ukraine, and this is one reason why we singled out the 2 countries as case studies within the project. Of course, the 2 countries have certain things in common. They're both they're the biggest countries with candidate status, which brings its own challenges in and of itself, of course, and they both have experience of severe conflict. Serbia with the Yugoslav wars in the 90s and the ongoing territorial dispute with Kosovo, and Ukraine with the Russian war of aggression. And these experiences, whether past or present, pose particular challenges for EU accession and will be a key part of the project. But there are also substantial differences between Serbia and Ukraine. So I already mentioned their contrasting attitudes towards the EU and the fact that Serbia was one of the first Western Balkan countries to open accession negotiations, while Ukraine is one of the most recent. Sentiments towards Russia also vary widely between the 2 countries, and for each country there are specific issues on the road ahead that need to be worked through, whether that relates to security, agriculture, rule of law, or the environment, to name just a few. So as part of the project, we will keep both these similarities and differences in mind to help us find common solutions, but also to avoid an approach of one size fits all. We aim first to identify the specific challenges of European integration for the Western Balkans, Ukraine and Moldova. And we then want to find ways that the candidate countries can learn from each other to establish best practices and to develop policy recommendations. We won't be doing this alone. So as I said, we've got an excellent cooperation with think tanks from across the region. We hope to establish an active network of both think tankers and experts from inside and outside the EU who can grapple with these topics together and develop joint solutions. The Visegrad region is an integral part of the project, as all 4 countries successfully joined the EU in 2004 and later also played an important part in the next round of accession. So they have therefore experienced both sides of the accession process and are in a strategic position to continue to influence opinions, decisions and processes. That's why we've included partners from all 4 Visegrad countries. And through the IDM, Austria is also represented in the project. And seeing as Austria has previously expressed opposition to key issues of integration, such as Romania and Bulgaria joining the Schengen area, it's very important that Austria is also part of the discussion. And we're glad to be able to be hosting the opening of this project with you here in Vienna today. After this, we will have roundtables in Serbia and Ukraine, which will be in a slightly smaller format with our project partners and also with experts. And we hope that this will enable us to make the project more accessible to local people from the respective countries. As we go along, we will also develop a series of policy papers with specific and practical recommendations for the next steps towards EU enlargement. Finally, we will present all our findings at the Budapest Balkans Forum in Hungary in the spring of 2026, which will once again allow us to reach a wider international audience. And we will share the outcomes on social media and via our newsletters. So keep an eye out there. And if you're not following us already, then you know what to do. And now I'm very much looking forward to the panel discussion. So I will leave it there and I'll pass back to Sebastian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I think this was a fantastic start to this project. I'm very excited about it because, as it has been mentioned, it brings together a lot of factors. And those who've been following our activities, we're a big fan of creating synergies. And this is really something that we are looking forward to. What we're also very good is dealing with challenges. Even if we plan the whole thing and try the whole thing, sometimes it doesn't really work, but we are adaptable, and I'm confident that now this time the video will be playing.
Yeah. Do the voice over.
Here the audio is not hearable, unfortunately. Briefly, but yeah, maybe we can try it one more time.
But we will do it without
Maybe the audio. Yeah, just
audience here.
yeah, maybe play it for us
Yeah, please.
without speaking.
Thank you. Well, almost. Yeah, it was not that hearable, but I mean the major part is the visual and not the audio. We will put a link to the video in the show notes. But from here, what you could see is, of course, that there's a variety of actors that are being brought together, and as I mentioned, we like to create synergies, and this is also why we use the panel discussion now to not only talk about future enlargement, which fits the topic of this project, but also talk about the unfortunately ending cycle of the Austrian presidency of the European Union strategy for the Danube region. And for this, when we now look at the wrapping up of this presidency, we reflect on a year of challenges in the Danube region, economic uncertainty, climate change, social inequality, all challenges that have also highlighted the need for more European integration. Ukraine, facing war, encounters specific challenges when it comes to the accession into the European Union, while the Western Balkans feel the effects of past conflicts still. We want to explore the whether and, if yes, what these regions can learn from each other, and how can we build resilience, security, and prosperity for the future of Europe. And what role does the EUSDR play in EU integration? And these questions we will discuss with 4 distinguished speakers tonight, and I ask them to the stage in alphabetical order. Nadia Afanasieva, Director of the Ukrainian Institute for International Politics from Kiev. Elina Bejic, Assistant Professor, Johannes Kepler, University of Linz. Robert Liesner, Coordinator of the Danube Strategy Point in Vienna. And Ambassador Harald Stranzl, National Coordinator of the EUSDR from the Federal Ministry of European and International Affairs. And I'm allowed to sit down also for this discussion, which I, of course, enjoy very much to be sitting on eye level with you. What we are going to do, if you have followed our discussions, we have a certain pattern. We will ask 2 rounds of questions and then open up the floor for the audience, of course. There's also a possibility to ask questions online, and then I will have a final rapid response round so that we finish in time for the last part of this conference, which I'm also very much looking forward to. But now, without further ado, we start with Ambassador Stranzl. As Austria is reaching the end of its presidency, presidency that was longer than usual because it started in November 2023 until the end of December 2024. Looking back, what have been the main challenges, apart maybe from the longer period and the longer responsibility? Because we've been in a year of transition, economic uncertainty, there's climate change, growing social imbalance, etc., etc. What are the lessons learned from the Austrian presidency?
Thank you, Secretary General. Yes, indeed, it's been really a rather difficult context with a bundle of challenges, but also useful lessons learned and also concrete achievements which we can, I think, together be proud of. 2024 was really a year of change, so to say, and the super election year. in the Danube region, in Europe and beyond. I mean, we have a new European Parliament. We have negotiations in Austria going on for a new government. So this was all also in terms of planning our presidency and the main events, annual forum and so on, not so easy. But nevertheless, we've overcome the problems. In a broader context, a new European Parliament, a new European Commission. Actually, with this new European Commission, also a European agenda. So there was also definitely a paradigm shift. You mentioned climate change, but we see now there's a bit less of a Green Deal and more new Industrial Deal. And all this in a way has to be reflected also in what we are doing. There is a new commissioner, Rafael Fito, for regional policy. There is actually also now to be seen the role of the macro-regional cooperation, also of the strategies with this new team at the helm of Europe. And then you've mentioned them already, so I can be very brief. Yes, far-reaching fundamental changes and transitions in Europe and also in the Danube region. Geopolitical situation, a very difficult one. The ongoing war, demography, growing social imbalances, also the profound transformation also of our work environment caused by skills shortage and digitalization, I think is also very, very important. And then last but not least, actually the economy, because more than ever before, actually, since I think the COVID pandemic, the European economies and business is really now in a mode of crisis, unfortunately. So competitiveness and this economic resilience of Europe are really at stake. So it's now more than ever before about strengthening industry, innovation, also at the core of the new agenda. And yeah, I think this is also what is very important and has to be taken into account. Another huge challenge is the war in Ukraine, unfortunately, the ongoing war of Russia against Ukraine, which is an EUSDR partner country. We have Nadia with us, so she can perhaps from her insight also give us a bit the insight on the situation on the ground. But what is clear for us at the beginning of our presidency until today, the war was and is the geopolitical context for the Austrian presidency of EUSDR. Not an easy one, and this war has fundamentally changed Europe and of course also the Danube region, because we've never witnessed, I think, a period where our region was more under pressure, facing systemic threats, destabilizing influence of Russia. Be very frank and very open this information. I think we have all in mind, I think, and also following a bit the situation in countries like Moldova and also Georgia. I think this is also very difficult situation when it comes actually to those countries' path towards Europe. And then, I mean, we're talking, of course, rightly so a lot about Russia, but also China is tackling the region in a very, very strategic, challenging way, you know, with infrastructure and investment projects. So all this, I think, has been a bit of a context and broader context of our presidency. And what is also, I think, important is that the Danube region has in history until this day always been at crossroads of diverging geopolitical influence and rivalries. I think also this is clear. And we all know that also Europe's security will be defined in the Danube region. So once again, Europe's security will be defined in the Danube region. And I think it was the former Austrian EU Commissioner Johannes Hahn often cited with the following quote, either we export stability from Europe towards the Middle East or the Southeast into the region, or we will import instability. So against this background, and I come already to the end of trying to answer your question, of course, number one priority of the Austrian EUSDR presidency was contributing to stability and security to the region and providing a clear European perspective for the whole region. Of course, Western Balkans and Eastern European EUSDR partners, above all Ukraine, but also Moldova, and to support to the extent possible also the reconstruction process. And last but not least, I think also very important, economic resilience was also high on the presidency agenda, fostering competitiveness, innovation, skills, and everything, because we know demography, brain drain, skills, and concrete perspectives for youth are really huge challenges in the Danube region. And just to give you an example, Bulgaria, for example, lost in a generation almost a quarter of its population. and 40% of the population of the youth population in Bosnia, if I'm correctly informed, would leave the country if it could. So these are really alarming figures. I think we have to take into account, and that's the reason why Austria also tried to prioritize youth and youth involvement to amplify their voices and perspectives in our president. I think I will close here. Lessons learned, perhaps. So just three remarks. I think what is really important if you want to accomplish a successful presidency is you have to ensure that your priorities, so the Danube region priorities, are to the extent possible aligned with the overall political agenda, nationally, of course, and also on the European level. I think it's very, very important. And that's the reason why we strive so much in the direction of enlargement, Ukraine, but also competitiveness, and to involve, let's say, high-level political representatives. I think we were rather successful. If there are any questions, of course, I could later on go into details. So we had a successful inner forum, we had a successful Danube Forum Ministers meeting, but we had also some novelties. It was, I think, for the first time that the mayors of the Danube capitals met here in Vienna during the annual forum. It was also the presidents of the parliament who met. It was MEPs coming together to discuss, let's say, the situation in the Danube region. So this is, I think, everything what I wanted to share with you, at least for this first round. Thank you.
Thank you, Harald. So, as it has been mentioned, Amina, that of course the EUSDR encompasses EU member countries, but also candidate countries. But here, especially also with regards to Western Balkans, the EUSDR naturally, therefore, would serve as a forum, as a format for European integration and supporting the region in that. And we heard just about the challenges that have been described. How would you evaluate these challenges in the region, especially with regards to bringing European integration forward?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can speak a lot about Bosnia and Herzegovina, of course, being from there and also doing a lot of research in the region. But Harald mentioned, I think, the most important points, and I could divide them in 3 points, which is institutional or political issues, let's say, to merge them. And then, of course, the economy, like you mentioned before. And then a big thing which really is affecting the region for decades and will affect it into the future as well, is immigration and the demographic decline, which is really, really shocking, actually, and you mentioned it before. So in terms of these political challenges, and I include everything in there, I mean, it's a lot, as you know, rule of law, political stagnation, and so on. And if you take the example of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which has been stagnating, I would say, for decades. I mean, we talked a little bit beforehand where you mentioned, oh, there are some positive developments, and we can talk about those maybe later. But what we can see also in other countries like Serbia and so on, is that their democratic institutions have been weakened in the last couple of years, I would say in the last decade. And this is, of course, a problem going further into European integration. In Bosnia, you have the legacy of the Dayton Agreement with the constitution, which is non-workable, really. I mean, whenever I joke with my dad whenever I'm in Bosnia, when you turn on the TV and watch the news, it doesn't matter if it's 2024, 2010 or 2004, the discussions are always the same. They're always about the constitution, about blockages from this entity, about blockages from that entity. And you also have relations in the other countries which are quite volatile. I mean, we all know about Serbia-Kosovo relations. There's been an explosion a couple of days or a couple of weeks ago in Kosovo I wrote it down, on water plants. And it was immediately blamed on Serbia as a terrorist attack and so on. So there is things are very, very volatile. And sometimes you believe, okay, things are going forward, but then things change quite quickly. And then you have the reactions to the war in Ukraine, where Serbia is, of course, on a different end than the other countries, but also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, due to the two entities, there is no agreement on how do we deal with the war in Ukraine and how do we deal with Russia and the impact of Russia. You mentioned the impact of other countries or nations, which the rather slow progress also from the EU side, and I think I can be quite open here, has opened a little bit of this void, or has opened a void which was closed by other countries like Russia, which has becoming quite influential in Serbia, for example, but also China. And I wrote down, and this brings me also to the economy. I wrote down quite an interesting figure. If you look at foreign direct investment from China, especially in Serbia. So if you look at 2010, it was 2.4 million euros. And now in 2022, it was 1.4 billion euros investments in infrastructure and in other countries. So I think China is feeling something that is, let's say, missing in the region. And that's political and of course connected with the economy. What is also connected with the economy is what you mentioned before as well, is the significant brain drain from, I wouldn't even say younger people, but all generations, and everybody who can sort of is thinking in their head, okay, we are going to leave, we are going to go to Western Europe. This also plays along with the demographic decline in Western Europe, of course. Some of you might know that, for example, Germany has, I think 2022, opened the so-called Western Balkans regulation. I mean, this attracted everybody, every kind of skill level, not only shortage occupations, not only highly skilled people, but really a lot of people from the region. Specifically, I'm thinking about also Bosnia and Herzegovina, where if you think about 15 years ago, when I, for example, went away to study here, people would go and come back and so on. But now whole families are leaving. People, I would even say in upper middle classes who have quite a good standard of living, quite a good life, are leaving due to this whole political stagnation, due to the toxic environment that they're facing. So this everything sort of comes back really to the political climate that is still raging in the region. If I think about Bosnia and Herzegovina specifically, but also in other countries when I talk to colleagues. So this is just in a nutshell a lot of challenges. But as I said, we talked a little bit beforehand, so it would be nice to hear also some positives.
Yeah. I think we all can use some positive news in general here in the region at a certain point, but maybe we get there. Sometimes we need to go through this valley to see the light, because I mean the next question is of course to you, Nadia, and well, it's been mentioned that maybe you can give us an update on the situation, of course, in Ukraine, but also with regards to, in general, the development with insight to European integration, especially also from a country that has had the presidency of the EUSDR very recently as well, where you have been heavily involved.
Well, here will come some positive things then. I think so. Because yes, if we talk about the presidency, this is of course was one of the biggest achievements for us as non-EU country.
You were the first non-EU
we were the
country.
first non-EU country, and we started presidency as a non-EU and end up with a candidate country. So of course for us, we know that the influence is not only the EUSDR, the positive influence, we perfectly all understand here this, but of course, one of the issues here was to push it forward, and the war was the biggest motivator in this sense, unfortunately. So here is the positive thing of the negative circumstances, right? Another positive thing is that coming back to the charts about the perception of Ukrainians of the EU. If you will go back to March 2022, I think you will hear 99% of Ukrainians who will say that we want in the EU. Nobody would answer you why, because a lot of people, even us, like with my neighbors, we were sitting in the shelter, and they were asking. They know where I'm working, so they were asking me, so when will we join EU in a week? Because we want to stop the shelling. So the logic is totally different. They haven't connected what is EU, why we are going to the EU, what we are going to EU, and what EU is giving to us. So this like a kind of the partnership of the EU, not the donations. But the positive point was that the motivation of people was rather high, that they wanted NATO and EU was on the very high level of support. Now it's rather it's much lower, as you see by the charts as well. But again, the lowerness, this like negative things is going lower and lower because of the promises of the EU, of NATO, of countries that we will give you weapons, we will support you, and nothing happens in real life. Or we need like kind of 3 years of shelling, of disruptions, of killing people. Then finally, US, for example, will say, okay, you can use our arms. Or to Russia, I mean, to hit Russia's how to put it, military objects. This is the point which normal citizen who is going to the EU doesn't really understand. Why is it so? Because from one side you are telling diplomatically that we support you, from another side you are doing nothing, or you are thinking very long way to do something. So and here is from one side, of course, this is our target to talk about with citizens, to explain what is EU, and this is not only the kind of the box where you are like taking money and nothing and giving nothing to the EU. You need to explain this, and by the way, you don't need to explain this only to candidate countries. Look at some EU countries. You need to do it the same with them. So this is a kind of the common goal for each of us, and such kind of the platforms as EUSDR could help in this, because we are making policies, and we need to understand that before investing in something, before financing some project programs, something, you need to make policies. You need to have this vision of the development, and rather like strategic vision of this development, because otherwise you cannot really understand how to go to the certain point without the steps you need to do. So this is, and I'm saying like truly, I can see this in different countries, including the EU, those who are trying to get a lot from the EU and giving nothing. This is not the point, of course. From Ukrainians, you can also hear, especially the local level, you can hear some reactions that why EU countries are interested in us. I mean, now we have a lot of partnership which are starting to discover, including, by the way, the Baltic Sea. They understand. I can say that that Baltic Sea countries understand very good the challenges of the neighbor country, so-called neighbor country. They are very clear and very supportive, and they are not really publicly support Ukraine, but if you go into details on the level of the town-to-town cooperation, you will see a lot of things which are going on there. And this is the issue of understanding that we need to be mutual partners, mutual cooperations. Of course, if we compare Austria with Ukraine, of course, it's rather hard to imagine that Ukraine will invest money in the EU budget, for example, or France and Ukraine. But till the end, we need to find another solutions to cooperate on, not only in the money, not only in investing money, but in some, or otherwise China will come. Because I really think that we were discussing like very recently with colleagues about this. When the war would be over, China can come to Ukraine very easy, because Ukraine will be prospective EU country, and they probably will not be interested so much already in Russia because of the slowing down the economy, or who knows. And some of China businesses will eagerly come to Ukraine, and including other candidate countries as well. So we need to think if we want so much influence of China in our region.
Yeah, I mean, what you were describing, we often look at only the numbers, what are contributed into the EU budget, which is marginal anyways, because we talk about 1.1% of the GDP of the EU member countries. And it's also clear that there is a difference how much money is paid regarding how big your GDP actually is. But there is secondary benefits. We should maybe more look at it as some membership fee rather than saying like I paid this much into the budget and I get this much out of it. And even I, as a political scientist, understand the basic math that nobody can pay less into and get more out of it. This simply doesn't work. But there's secondary benefits coming out of this. We actually also talked about this in the paper that Rebecca mentioned. That if you look at how much more Germany pays into the budget, but the percentage of what they benefit from single market integration triples, for instance, in comparison with the next biggest economy, which is France. Just a brief follow-up question, because I've got curious now, because we saw on the chart also that Ukrainians are very optimistic that they can join the EU in 3 to 5 years. Do you think that this is also part of not understanding how complicated the process can be and how cumbersome the EU member states can make it, or are they simply so optimistic?
I think this is a part of the informational influence in the mass media, because a lot of people, like on the local level, on the regional level, even the national level, they are saying this on TV, but if you are in the working groups on negotiations, of course, the discussion is totally different. But this is needed, at least now, this is needed very much to maintain this motivation of people. I'm actually in that chart, I'm in between like 9%, like I would expect some 7 years, maybe 7-9 years of the accession. And also maybe not the full accession, but what is now discussed about the partial accession, starting, for example, from the single market, and then go into like common space without any kind of the border. So to ensure the economic growth, to ensure the economic exchange with the EU, and then ending up with some very technical things which will allow us to go fully in. This is the discussion. We do not know how it will end up, because the situation with war also is very changeable. We don't know what will be in some months. Sometimes we are very optimistic. Sometimes we see the results of the front line, and they are very critical sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, maybe they're just very well informed, because we looked also at the average negotiation time. The average negotiation time in all successful enlargement was 3.5 years. So maybe that's just the case. But Robert, let's take it a bit more back to the EUSDR. What can Ukraine and the Western Balkans learn from each other in the view of their specific experiences within the EUSDR, also in view of next year's presidency, which will be held by Bosnia and Herzegovina?
I'll also try to go on the positive side, as Nadia said. I mean, we all do know the issues and the problems that we are dealing with, and we heard by Ambassador Stancl just a few topics that we are all dealing with. When we look at the Danube Region strategy, I think the very unique feature that this kind of cooperation concepts have in Europe, and we have 4 such strategies. You also mentioned one of them, where you really look at this regional cooperation and take up the problems on a really regional level. This is something that is very new in European territorial cooperation. With new, we mean something over 10 years, 15 years in the Baltic region. The Danube region is the second oldest one. Then we have the Mediterranean one, and we have the Alpine one. So there is 4 such concepts, 4 such strategies, where you really try to and we say this, you can give it a very complicated speech, but to put it in a very, very simple way, is that these countries and regions are connected by the problems. Because in in these times, and we heard this, be it pollution, be it economy, be it the war, be it all other problems that we are dealing with, the Green Deal, competitiveness enterprises, all these problems do not stop in the borders. And if countries, single countries and regions try to solve these problems only within their territories, we're not going to be successful as European Union or as Europe as a continent. So the basic notion there is really to cross the borders and really to think a little different, think out of the box, and try to unite countries, try to unite the regions, and think about solutions where all the countries are working on it, are getting solutions out of this. And this is the basic concept, and this is something that works very well. And we have seen this again. The Danube Region strategy has been here since 2010, and the implementation has been here for some time. And Ukraine was the first non-EU country that took the presidency. We even have EU countries that have not had a presidency yet. And so there you also see that countries also understand how you can actually profit, how you can also bring in your own perspective. And Ukraine was the first one. Now we have the second non-EU country, Bosnia, taking over from next year for the period of 1 year. And we see, and Ambassador Stranzl also mentioned this, the EU enlargement is one of the topics that, of course, you are hearing this in the media, negotiations are going on, but in the Danube strategy, we see also this regional perspective. We also see how regions react to this and how also the countries are pushing the gradual integration through the regions, and it's basically the other way around. It's a little bit bottom-up approach. We have in the Danube Region strategy 14 countries, and the region is so diverse. We have the richest countries there with Germany, Austria, and on the other hand, we have countries, we have Republic of Moldova, for example, there. So the challenges are also very, very different, and there is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So this is also something that you really need to bring down on a regional level and then provide solutions. And something that we have seen that also during the Ukrainian presidency, we have seen this motivation when you started, and you had a very, very ambitious agenda back then. And I remember it was few months after your presidency started, and then the war came up on you. So Ukraine was actually not able to fulfill all the agenda that you had, which was politically brilliantly prepared, and everything was running back then. But after, it was something over a month, so Ukraine basically stepped down from having the presidency in the EUSDR, in the Danube Region strategy, and it was not even a month after you stepped down, you actually came back. And that was so impressive, not only for on this governance level, but for so many people working with the Danube Region strategy. So you have a country that is in the midst of the war coming back and fulfilling the presidency agenda. And we have a similar situation now. You're there over 1,000 days, being under attack, under war. And because you ask what can the two countries learn from each other, I think the approach here is not only for the two countries, but what can actually all the other countries learn from each other. Because in the Danube Region strategy, we try to work as a common framework, as a common policy framework. And if there is one or two countries not being on the table, we're not going to do what we want to do. So everyone has to be part of this. And we have seen, since Ukraine was so active with the presidency, you can also see on the policy level and on the political level that Ukraine has been there ever since, being very driven, being very political, bringing in their own perspective, and also pushing the other countries. And this is something, it's always difficult to have something positive out of that thing like a war. But we also see in the cooperation and in the Danube strategy that also the war that affects, of course, primarily your country, but also affects all our countries. And we see that also this enlargement push is also very much connected with the war. And a very same example is now with Bosnia-Herzegovina taking over the presidency now. We had Bosnia, I would say, not very present in the last year. So the efforts, the participation in the Danube strategy from the side of Bosnia-Herzegovina was, let's say, up and down. But now, since it was clear that Bosnia will take over the presidency, they have prepared a very excellent agenda. They are already starting with chairing the meetings, and again, in something over less than a month, they will take over the presidency. I can give you a bit later also the overview what they'll be looking at. But the important thing that we see in the strategy is the continuity. So when we really look back, and I would stay with you with Ukraine, when you started with your thematic and political priorities, since then we had Slovenia, Austria now, and Bosnia taking over from the next year. What we have seen is the continuity of political efforts, enlargement being top priority on all presidencies, and this is something that Bosnia will also take as their political priority, and there it will be also interesting for not only Western Balkan countries, not only for Ukraine and Moldova, but also to see for the EU member states how an accession country on a macro-regional level will push the enlargement agenda, the enlargement envelope. So this will be, I'm very sure it will be something also for the EU member states to learn from, how the enlargement can go, should go, and how can we do this all together. So the cooperation area is, I think, something very important, really, to keep on working for the whole region.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You also already partially answered the next follow-up question that I would have had, but I would then just expand it and go in a little bit of a different direction, because you mentioned that you could highlight parts of the program that we can expect from Bosnia, but I would extend that question to, since you have been following a lot of presidencies over the past decade, is there something that you would say is something? Well,
He's not that old.
Decade, singular, but still, I'm sorry. We need to face it. It's a decade has passed. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know I'm also in denial every morning when I look in the mirror, but it happens. Anyway, so I wanted to know about the last decade, where you have maybe seen some continuities, some similarities of presidencies, but also is there can you see like regional differences if you compare them, also especially the latest presidencies? Ukraine, you mentioned Slovenia, but also Austria, and then with insight what you maybe can already share with us what Bosnia has planned.
Well, since we clarified, it's a decade.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would return to where I started before for this cooperation concept, and this is something that again, the oldest macro-regional strategy has been here for 14 years, and 14 years is not a long time. If we think back about the European Union, how we cooperate, which is something very normal, and that how many years this has taken to have a governance, to have a European Commission, to have council, to have all these things which are very normal to us, and that the accession countries now also learning, getting into this. For such formats, again, we are having 14 countries there in the Danube Region strategy. Really, to be there, to have a stable governance, and to have this cooperation and the trust. Trust is one of the most important things. And one of the theories there is that also this macro-regional cooperation matures as older it grows. So the more you cooperate, the longer you are actually in touch with each other, the more you implement, for example, policies. And this is the very, very nice thing on macro-regional cooperation is that before you do project, the macro-regional strategies are not about projects. Projects are being funded by programs. This is the very simple logic. If there is a problem, we want to solve it, we'll make a project. What the macro-regional strategies can actually do is really to look at policies in the countries and see what do we need in order to change something, to solve an issue, for that, we need to change policies. And this is where it gets really complicated because you have EU member states, you have non-EU member states. Many states have different ideas on how to do this, and then you need to align. And in many cases, you need to change national legislation before you can then implement projects. And again, then implementing projects is not a big deal because then you prepare a project, you get the money, and then you implement. Again, I hope it. I don't want to sound that the implementing project is easy, but if you look at also the time in order to change legislation in let's say 10 countries, 14 countries, that really takes time. And this is how macro-regional, the implementation of macro-regional strategy is so special because first you change policy and then you change then you implement projects. And this is something where also non-EU member states or accession countries are part of the system on the same eye level. So when we are doing this, you are also actively as a EU accession country working on this. So you are also changing the legislation, you are also implementing the projects. And what we've seen, and I'm returning now to this maturity of macro-regional cooperation. We have been here, the secretariat that we are running from Vienna and from Bucharest, we started with 2018. And back then, and Rudy is here, you remember when we started the implementation, there was a lot of discussions. There was a lot of also uncertainty in which way to go, what agendas do countries want to have. And we've seen throughout the years since 2018 that this trust has evolved. And when you have trust, then you can actually cooperate and you can start doing projects. And you can also politically take over from one presidency to the other one. This was something that we are seeing now seamlessly. You remember when Ukraine had the presidency, there is topics that are with us on the EU level, but there is also topics that are with us on the EUSDR level. And we see this, for example, on the Bosnian presidency. There were several things that the Slovenians started. Austria took over. Again, not going to repeat enlargement for the fifth time, but remember, Harald, when we had a discussion, when Austria prepared the agenda, there was the discussion about security. And remember, when we're not so sure, are we going to go for this? How is it going to work politically? And now we see that security is the top topic that we are dealing with on EU level, and Bosnia is taking over security as one of their topics. So there is this continuity of implementation that we have, where Bosnia can immediately take over the results that Austria had and continue with that. So we have security, something that Bosnia will be looking into, starting with the civil process protection, with the migration management, border security, organized crime, digital security. So this will be one big part to look at. Also, tourism and culture will be a topic that Bosnia will be looking at, really trying to connect the tourism organizations, also look at sustainable tourism in the region. And the third topic is dealing with connectivity and green transition. So also the connection to green transition and pollution and all these topics. And something that also you mentioned, education and labor market. Bosnia clearly being the country with the most young people, most young generation leaving the country. This is something that also will be tackled. And Slovenia started, for example, with this topic last year. And there we also see this continuity. Bosnia will be also dealing with this topic, being one of the most affected countries in the region, especially as of demography. So this is something where we see and how we see this continuity working, and also the general cooperation notion becoming very natural and very normal in the macro region.
Thank you. I want to continue with challenges that are in a broader context with Almina. Maybe not only you mentioned, of course, as a result of the wars, the Dayton Agreement, which is especially challenging in the case of Bosnia, but maybe we can put it in an overall regional context here. Although the wars in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, have ended decades ago, this time it's actually 2 decades. This is correct. The effects continue to be felt, and how is the long-term impact of war hindering integration in the region here?
Yeah, I mean, I think also coming back to Bosnia and the complex situation, like, we can never not talk about the Dayton Agreement and the constitution, and because it's connected with the ethnicity-based political system which is in the country, and that's also, of course, connected with the other regional interests in the country, and all of that is just enshrined in the Dayton Agreement, or actually in the constitution, which is part of the Dayton Agreement. And this legacy is going on for decades, almost 3 decades now. And I was thinking about myself when I was a child, right, at the time. And this is felt in neighboring countries, of course, some of whom, like Croatia, are already EU members, but who have specific interests in some regions, let's say in Bosnia, but also in Serbia and so on. And it's also felt in the Kosovo-Serbia relations, which I mentioned before are quite volatile. But I think one other thing which is very interesting probably for Ukraine, hopefully going forward, once the war is over, is there was, after the war, for example, in Bosnia, there was a lot of financial aid that was being poured into the country, billions of euros, billions of dollars, and so on. And I'm thinking how this was managed, which was very intransparent. There's a lot of corruption, so the corruption is still ongoing for decades, not only in Bosnia but in the other countries as well. And I think when we, for example, think about Ukraine and then the restructuring of the country and changes, that there should be more, in my view, you probably not see better, more self-governance and more transparency in how aid and how money, for example, is handled. I think this is one point that definitely hinders also, let's say, integration in the region. But intransparency, corruption, and all those things that affect not only the political system but affect also the economy and affect at the end, which you mentioned before, how do people feel about living in the region and the future of the region. If you remember now the charts where people in Ukraine were quite positive. If you see the Western Balkan countries, I mean, it's just a downward spiral. And from 2022 to 2024, I found this very interesting. It changed more to the negative. People are simply also don't believe that they will soon enter the EU, let's say. But I feel like also when you talk to people in the region, there is no feeling what will change actually if at some point 2030 is a talk and so on, this will happen. So I think this is one really big thing. This political stagnation is connected with how the reconstruction or rebuilding of the countries has been handled after the wars. And they're still handled. And I mean, if you go to Bosnia and Herzegovina, there are regions where it looks like 1995. So, but of course, it's not only that. Of course, some things have changed already to the better. And the other thing is the narrative of the wars hasn't been, or how they're being framed hasn't been really changed. So there is a different narrative in one country, different narrative in another country, and so on. And I feel like something like the EUSDR could really also push towards changes there, because we are all then in the same region, right? And then some discussions could be taken further, which are not discussed currently, or if they are discussed, they're with different views. And then I mentioned this before. There are EU members, and you mentioned it as well, have different interests in the region, and I think this also plays quite a bigger role. So if you think about Hungary, when Orban is coming to visit the region, what he's saying and so on. And of course, we have positive examples like Austria, who has a big standing in the region. So I think this also plays quite a bit of a role. And the management or the mismanagement of the immigration or the demographic decline. There is no diaspora policy. There is no policy how to deal with a large amount of people living abroad and people who are connected actually abroad, but not very well connected to their country. I think so something that Ukraine could take further, maybe not as an example, but as an example of how to deal with your own diaspora if people will pay for the We have done some projects also with Ukrainian diaspora in Austria, and people now, if you talk with them, they will stay, at least for, let's say, the middle foreseeable. So I think this is something that could be better managed as well, and it's blocking a lot of things as well.
But I would follow up with what you have described, Amina, and pass on to Nadia the question here, these lessons learned, because we have also successful countries that have joined the European Union, that are EUSDR countries, that have also experienced war on a different scale, if we take Slovenia, but then also Croatia. And here the question, of course, is where are possibilities? Where do you see possibilities here? But also maybe the challenges when we look at the other Western Balkan countries that have been waiting for 21 years since the Thessaloniki promise, and now are experiencing that this unjustified war of aggression is speeding up suddenly this process. How do you see post-war countries dealing with EU integration and then also the possible applied lessons to Ukraine?
One of the first points which I want to mention, of course, that if the military part of the war is ending, the war will not be ending, because we still have this digital war, and the influence will be. We need just to accept it, and to think how we together can manage with this through different types of defense, digital defense, informational campaigns for the citizens, how to perceive the information, how to find the fakes, because the fakes are like this everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And a lot of people are trusting it. And even those who are working in the European Commission, they sometimes are saying very crazy things. Like, in my opinion, this is a crazy thing, but they have heard this on TV somewhere in Brussels, and everybody is trusting this. And from one side, I can understand from where it is, but from another side, each of us, we need to be very critical to all the information we are getting from the YouTube, from internet, from TV, especially. We need to know from where this information and what is the purpose of the information which are getting to us. How we can, if we perceive it or not, if we trust it or not, if it rises somehow the waves of emotional, positive or negative. So this is the case that we really need to know since the schools and maybe some kindergartens at some points. And I really believe that these things of the informational defense need to come to our programs when we are talking with the students, when we are talking with their even schools and with pupils, that they need to know from where they are getting information and how they are critically perceive this information. So that's why I'm very happy about the Bosnian presidency, that they do really accepted the challenge to introduce in the presidency program the defense and security issues, because for me it was a big surprise when Austrians announced the security as one of the priorities, because I think it is for the first time in the strategy when the presidency have taken such kind of the priority. This shows the importance of this priority for each of us, for all 14 countries. Not only for Austria or not only for Ukraine. Another challenge, of course, is in general the process. Ukraine is a big country, so from one side we understand that we now formed we have 33 chapters of negotiations. It's a huge amount of work. So now we have the how we call it, intergovernmental. Yeah, intergovernmental working groups, which are connected, which are like include parliamentary committees as well, of course, the government, of course, civil society, business associations. And these groups will prepare each chapter has its own group. Us, my organization, we are in chapter 22, the group on regional development and structural funds. And of course, I mean, this, we will have, like, on the 11th, we will have the meeting, and afterwards I will sign the paper that I cannot say anything, so now I can still say anything about this. The first meeting will be on 11th. But what I wanted to say, of course, we see what we miss in the legislation. From another side, we really can introduce it in the legislation, but we need to make it work on the level of regions, on the level of community. In some cases, of course, when we say about the perception of the municipalities or regional administrations, they are coming with their problems that they have businesses who are coming out of the regions, including the Western regions. They have refugees, IDPs, so-called internally displaced persons. They have a lot of different problems, and now we are coming here with a long package of different kind of integration, also called integration of a package. Of course, they are like looking like this at us and saying, "Come on, you are here again. What do you want from us? We need somehow to develop ourselves, but not to play with your papers." And here is a very big challenge to explain that you need to start with these papers, because otherwise, including if we take into account the Ukraine facility, one of the instruments that we are developing now to make it functionable, we already started to obtain money within the macro-financial support, and we have 3 pillars. One is macro-financial, second is about the like so-called for business development, for economic development, and third is for support of the projects of civil society and local level as well. And of course, here is the thing to use the money wise, because if you use the money for some economic projects which will push forward the economy of the region, this is one way. If you will use the money for also needed growth, infrastructure, building some houses, this is another way. So you need to balance in between these. From one side, you need this. Of course, people cannot live without houses. You need this somehow. But from another side, this is a very tricky thing to think how you can invest money and gain even more from this invested money in the regional development. And from this sense, it's rather complicated for the regional authorities and for local authorities to understand how to proceed, because they want now and they are expecting elections already. So here is the tricky thing for them, how to obtain the political advantage already now, but not waiting for some fairy tales from another financial instruments or whatever. So this is the game. We are coming back again to the very clear strategic vision, how you see the development of your region now, because you are like a lot of regions which now can develop themselves. They are not on the front line, they are rather far, so they can invest. Yes, they have problems, of course, with electricity. All country has the electricity problem now because of the energy and infrastructure was hit. But still, you need to think about this, and sometimes these plans. And I can say you the example from our municipalities. We now are working with some like 7 regions in the project with 30 municipalities which are closer to the front line. So almost all 30 municipalities that we have taken to the project, they were or occupied or partially occupied or permanently shelling or still are under shelling. So the perception of, you can understand the perception of these communities which are under permanent attack, under pressure. But at the same time, when you are talking which projects do you want, they are saying about the industrial park. And when you ask in how many kilometers do you have from the front line, they say 30. And they still thinking about this. And if you ask in what do you expect from your industrial park, they are saying, okay, we can just plan the feasibility study on the taking 3 years. This is the approach I can understand this, because you need to think, you need to plan for the future, and when the war is over, you can already open your arms for investors who will come to you, but you need to have this vision, understand how it's formed.
Yeah. Thank you. I have one more question for Ambassador Stanzel, and I'll open up for the audience, so get ready. We've heard a lot now what the EUSDR contributes, what European integration is necessary. Maybe you can bring it together from your perspective, also with the experience of this, and it's over a year now of this presidency. What can the EUSDR do to contribute to European integration from your applied experience?
Yes, of course. I think I start once again with a kind of dilemma or a bit of a contradiction, because if this war, this illegal war against Ukraine has brought one positive thing, it has moved the enlargement issue higher on the EU's agenda, I think, and we would have to be very clear, Ukraine would not be a member country, I'm an accession country, with a clear membership perspective without the war. So once again, it's perhaps cynical to say this in the presence of Ukrainian colleague of Nadia, but at the same time, it's a given. And we all know that the enlargement is the most effective, if not the only geopolitical tool European Union disposes of. I mean, I could, of course, also dealing with trade policy in the ministry, also talk about trade agreements and so on, but nevertheless, enlargement is the geopolitical tool of EU, full stop. And we have another paradox on, because we have had so many years enlargement fatigue in the European Union. Now, all of a sudden, the member states, including more critical ones like France and others, Netherlands, are ready really to go into a complete discussion about enlargement, Western Balkans and Eastern neighborhood. Now, all of a sudden, we see there are huge uncertainties on the side of the accession countries or the possible or potential candidate countries. I mean, I start with Moldova, for example. I mean, we've seen that in this recent referendum, that only with the help of the diaspora, I think this referendum at the end of the day saw a positive outcome. Otherwise, the Moldovan, let's say, population had said no to the prospective EU membership. So I think this is also that we have to be really clear about. I mean, also Bosnia-Herzegovina, Almina have said it all. I think I don't have to go into details, but also, of course, a lot of frustration on the slow progress and everything, and the internal discussions. Georgia, another example. I mean, the EU has really been very speedy, very quick in the sense of providing Georgia this concrete membership perspective. Then all of a sudden, you've had elections, and the current, let's say, regime there, I would call it, said, no, thank you. I mean, we are not interested anymore. So this is a bit of a really awkward situation. And with Ukraine, I think Nadia has said it again, but here again, very, very difficult situation internally, because there is on the Ukrainian side, and rightly so, this perspective. I think everything is so slow, and we are talking about paper and documentation. And at the same time, I mean, our soldiers are being killed on a daily basis, and for what? So I mean, and at the same time, on the EU side, and I agree with you, Sebastian, only to a certain extent, we said, okay, yeah, I mean, member states have given help to Ukraine, could be always more. But at the same time, let's be clear that the European Union is by far the #1 donor to Ukraine. And I mean, if I mention now a figure like $150 billion or euros, you can always say, okay, it's small money, but at the same time, we all know that the civil servants of Ukraine couldn't be paid without this help of European Union member states. So I think this is, of course, very difficult to explain, of course, to a country and to people where war is going on. But at the same time, and I quote now actually the Finnish foreign minister, so it's not the Austrian one or another one, who said the other day, who talked about a certain Ukraine fatigue also on the side of the member states and of donor countries. Because it's a very difficult one, and I have problems actually to spell it out, you know. But nevertheless, I think this is very difficult situation on both sides. Expectation management here, a very low, of course, popularity of the current government and the president in Ukraine. Of course, I mean, no surprise to all of us against the complicated military situation. At the same time, a delicate situation also on the sides of the donor countries, including, let's say, EU member states. I mean, I could go on and on this Ukraine issue, but of course, it's very, very close and very dear to my heart, because I'm personally in the ministry also looking over these reconstruction efforts, at least as far as the Austrian government and the Austrian Foreign Ministry is concerned. And it's dear to me, you know, and we want to help. But what is also clear is, against the background of this so much discussed Keith Kellogg plan, I mean, the so-called peace plan of the US representative, and whether it's just peace or not a just peace, others have to comment on that one. But it's also interesting in the sense that all of a sudden, you know, there is at least clearer perspective than before, that, you know, this war will end, hopefully sooner than later. Hopefully also, let's say, on fair terms for your country. But what is interesting to me is that this Kellogg report or plan also has a very strong focus on reconstruction. I think that this is very important. I think this brings us together again, all the donor countries and Ukraine, because we want to help Ukraine, not only because we want to help Ukraine reconstruct its country, because we know it's also a business case, and very frank, very, very undiplomatic. It's also a business case. We mentioned before China and other countries, but at the same time, I'm sure that with this membership perspective, I think the European countries have the chance that before war has to end. I know from Austrian companies, and there are 200 of them, while we speak, as we speak, still in the country, and they employing, I think, almost 30,000 of Ukrainian people in their companies, in the factories in Ukraine all over. But they tell me, you know, to be really ready to invest more to help Ukraine to reconstruct, you know, war has to end, you know. So it's of course a very difficult one, but I wanted to make this one clear. And then, you know, more concretely on EUSDR's role, I mean, for us, for Austria, it's so clear there is no alternative to enlargement. Whether we can sell it to our, let's say, you to the Ukrainian people, we to the Austrian people, I mean, there is no alternative. I mean, that's for sure. It's more urgent than ever. And where we are also a bit proud of ourselves as a relatively small or medium-sized country in the EU 27. It was the foreign minister, Schallenberg, who in a way advocated, now successfully advocated, that also the foreign ministers and the ministers of the accession countries will on an equal footing participate in the EU Council meeting. I think it's a very important first move that, you know, not only the member states talk about the accession countries, but also the accession countries are in the room and not only discussed about, but also contribute to the discussion. It's perhaps a small, but a very symbolic, I think, and concrete step. And then, you know, EUSDR, to finish, yes, of course, a very useful tool in all these efforts, because it's a kind of laboratory of accession. You can already, you know, get involved, build networks, but also learn how these EU policies work, you know, and how also you get access to funds and so on. I think this is also very, very important. Yeah, I think I stop here perhaps with a bit of a philosophical final remark. I mean, we've seen that that some 60, 70 years ago, it was the Rhine who had the vocation to be a kind of the river, in a way reconciling countries who were in war before, for not only for decades, but also for centuries. And now I think it's really a perfect perspective that now the Danube all of a sudden has this perspective, not being the longest river in Europe, and I think the most international river basin in the world, has the vocation to be the #2 or new river of European integration of East and Southeastern Europe. And I find this picture and this image very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this shows what also Busek has been saying. This is certainly a very nice image. Yeah, we open up the floor for discussion. I've already 3, 4, 5. So first of all, introduce yourself, and then always remember, kids, keep it short and simple. Address a question to a certain person. We start with Alfred Kraus.
Alfred Kraus, Ukrainian Austrian Association. I have founded and I'm presiding that since 2017. Concerning accession of the Western Balkans and also, of course, Ukraine. I have lived there for 15 years, 16 years. There is one obstacle, and that is that in my humble view, European Union is not ready. There are some steps missing, reorganizing the European Union. The principle of unanimity, this against the backdrop of Putin trying to divide the European Union, look at Fico, look at Orban, etc., etc. You will not reach the unanimity. One thing. Second thing, keep it short, talking about Ukraine. There has been a high level and very big study of Institute of International, Wiener Institute Internationale Wirtschaftsverträge concerning the readiness of Ukraine to become part of the European Union. Unfortunately, it was stated that under the given circumstances, this would mean an additional payment transfer to Ukraine of between 120 and 180 billion euro. And if you look at the borders, Ukraine to Poland, to Hungary, to Romania, to Slovakia, what's happening there concerning export of agricultural products, etc., you see what it will mean to get into details and discussions to get Ukraine into the European Union, which is necessary. And also the Balkans have to join, absolutely. But I see very rough obstacles. Sorry, maybe.
Is there a question in there?
No. I would
Then thank you. Thank you.
Who is very well knowledgeable about this situation.
No, oh, sorry.
Go.
Okay, I'll try to be very, very short.
Yeah.
Thank you for this, because very, very intelligent question. I would say, yes, you're right in so many things, but at the same time, we all know when we talk about accession in Ukraine, we don't talk about accession tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and we don't talk necessarily about a full-fledged integration in one step. So it can be a gradual integration, and this might help a lot. I admit it will be with Ukraine, given let's say agricultural policy, given regional policy and cohesion policy, very, much more difficult than for the relatively small Western Balkan countries. So that's the reason why of course, we hope that there will be, of course, a quick accession process for the Western Balkan countries, given also that they've negotiated already for quite some time, but also, of course, a way forward for Ukraine. I mean, on the split of the European Union member states, and you mentioned Fico and Orban and so on. At the same time, I would like to remind you that there is now the 15th package of sanctions under discussion of all the EU27. With all the differences and of course political affiliations and so on. I wouldn't like to go into details. At the same time, until now, there's always been a EU27 consensus on sanctioning Russia. 15 times.
Thank you. So we have Grigori, Rahinia, Gunter, and then you.
Thank you very much. My name is Grigori Nesebnikov. I'm here representing one of partner organizations, Institute for Public Affairs. It's our first time when we will work in this format because we have very rich experience in implementation of projects in V4, Visegrad 4, but also some bilateral relations, including our projects with Ukraine. So now, just to emphasize one very important agenda and very important context. The integration of Western Balkan states into European Union and Ukrainian integration to European Union. I mean, it's something which has completely different dynamism than before. When our countries were becoming members of European Union, there was no any enemy state which wanted to prevent us. But now we know that, I mean, Russia, both in case of Western Balkan and in even more robust way, is trying to stop this. I mean, to stop this process. So it means that if theoretically, if Russia will succeed in the war, and if the movement of Ukraine toward European Union will be complicated or blocked, I hope that not blocked, but it will be complicated. It's a question for us. It's not only for Ukraine. I mean, it possibly would lead in the worst case scenario to, I think, demise of democracy, free society, and integration in the European Union. So what I would like to emphasize is, of course, we will work on these issues of exchange of experience with the transformation. By the way, our institute was monitoring during our accession process. We analyzed this process, and then we will focus on some kind of transfer of this experience to mostly to Ukraine, less to some other countries of Eastern Partnership, mostly to Ukraine. So now I would be very happy if our work will lead not only to elaboration of this analysis, but maybe kind of advocacy energy will be radiated from this project, because I know that, I mean, there are big fishes in pressure to different actors in European Union inside, and Mr. Ambassador, I think that I'm very happy to listen that he emphasized that, I mean, it's something which should be implemented, that enlargement will happen, but we know that, the reality dynamism is different in different countries. So I would be very glad if we will produce not only this, but also this kind of advocacy. Again, without free and whole Europe, both in Balkan, Western Balkan, but even now, even maybe more, Ukraine, European Union cannot survive in its, this form of really community of secure, free, and democratic countries. Because Russians, they do not have good intentions with us, and they are trying now by their possible successes in Ukraine to target not only Ukraine but also us.
Thank you. Strania, will you add to this as another project partner?
So thank you once again for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I represent European Policy Center from Belgrade, Serbia. My name is Strahinja Subotic, and I have two questions for Ukrainian and Austrian colleagues. For you, we talked about years, potential dates, the expectations of the people. If I saw correctly, Ukrainians believe 3 to 5 years would be good enough to acquire membership. You mentioned the more realistic version, maybe up to 9 years, even beyond. So my thesis is that we'll actually know by the end of 2026 about the European future of Ukraine and other countries, because until then, member states will need to finalize their multi-annual financial framework, which will last up until 2034. So if you don't have any budget section that is supposed to accommodate future enlargement rounds, I think this will send a message to all of us, you, us, and other candidates, what the EU actually has in store for us. So once we're in 1st January 27, how does Ukraine communicate to its citizens? And is there a danger that once those 3, 4, 5 years pass, that we might enter this phase of enlargement disillusionment, and thus causing some damage to their hopes and aspirations? And when it comes to you, having in mind that we created the staged accession model, you might have heard of it, advocating for this gradual integration by giving more incentives to the candidates to unlock the political will for reforms. On the one hand, it has the financial part, which is fine. We have the Ukraine facility, we have now Moldova new growth plan, Balkan growth plan. But as you mentioned, we also want to allow for gradual institutional participation, particularly in the council. And our proposal was actually that as you open a cluster, that you should have increased access to working bodies in the council. And as you close a chapter, you should increase the level of participation from COREPER to the ministerial level. And we proposed it as part of while consulting the Council Legal Service opinion. So my question to you is, do you have any clue how far EU member states have gone in terms of finding a consensus on the necessity to politically involve the candidates even before they achieve membership? Thank you.
Okay, we add to this because we have 5 minutes left. Gunther, keep it short and simple.
My name is Günther Fehling. I'm development consultant. I'm campaigning for EU enlargement and for NATO enlargement. Here the link is very important because we are at war. We can only take NATO members into the EU in the future, or at least if they really, like Ukraine, want to join NATO, or like Kosovo really want to join NATO. So Serbia or Georgia, who don't want to do that, can certainly not join. But very concretely, my questions here about the EUSDR. I think it would be more polite to change the name a little bit towards the Dnieper River, to include it as well. The Danube and Dnieper River. This is my question. Would not that be much more concrete and useful in the future to change the name and to turn this logistical chain in a real military supply chain for Ukraine? Every time when I'm at the Danube here, I see very little ships bringing military goods into Ukraine and very little one bringing Ukrainian goods into Austria or Germany. And this should be, I think, very much in the center of our logistical way for victory. Thank you.
Thank you.
See another committee for campaigning, and then Julia.
And thank you again for your insights. I'm Anna and I'm from Ukraine. I'm doing my internship at the Ministry of Labor and Economy, and I'm finishing my master thesis on the topic of perception of Ukrainians on the EU accession. So actually, I'm also dealing with these aspects. And as mentioned, the support is slightly going down, so it's like nearly 84%. And I'm also trying to find different aspects why it is happening. So it is related to the media influence. However, as I found out, the uncertainty grows. So the percentage of those people who say, I don't know if I want Ukraine in the European Union remain, so it grows. However, the percentage of those being skeptical remains. So that's about the uncertainty. And my question would be maybe for you, Nadia. When time for the referendum comes and Ukraine have all the work done, do you expect Ukrainians to vote not that enthusiastically for the EU accession? And probably it will also be related to the other candidate countries in the region. And in this aspect, how would the EUSDR contribute to avoiding this situation?
Thank you very much. So since I also have a final question, I ask also you to keep it short and simple in the answer. Who wants to start? Okay, then I say Nadia.
I was trying to remember the first question. Let me start from this one, and then I will remember. Yeah, I remembered your question as well. But yeah, let me start with the referendum. Of course, this is up to us, especially those who are working in the region, just to explain what are the results of the EU integration for yourself, what it gives to you, exactly in very practical cases. Other ways we really don't have, because you can take everything on the national level, on the level of parliament, on the level of government, but if you are not communicating this, and we are really weak in this for now, I can say. That's why in some cases people do not really know how the EU can influence their lives just on the ground. In this sense, and Ukraine is a big country, so if there are some cross-border cooperation, for example, those regions know better how the EU is influencing. If we are taking, not sure, maybe Poltava region, maybe they will not really understand how the things are going and what could be the result. Another issue is about the cooperation with the EU countries, and now there are a lot of financial programs which are coming to Ukraine for the first time when, for example, Interact Europe, which is one of the biggest program, I think, on the policy developments and capacity building for civil servants and local authorities. which is demonstrating how people can start to plan together all these issues, and all these results can be transferred to their citizens on the ground. So if the local authority, the city, is going together in partnership with Spain, with Finland, with Italy, and the mayor is showing, look, we have 2 million and something project with these partners. Do you think that people will say, oh, come on, this is a bullshit? I think no. They will definitely make some applause to the mayor, and they will elect him again, because the mayor is taking you somehow the best practices. There's not something, he's giving something to you, and you can feel it by different results, what people can feel. So from the local level, this really needs to start. The national level could do its job, but the local level is very important. It's like crucial here in terms of the referendum. Concerning your question about the and yes, if I comment a bit, very shortly, what you said about the money what you need to invest in Ukraine. If we go back 10 years ago in 2014, when the war actually started in Ukraine, if that time the EU and NATO will react more precisely, we will not have so many money to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Let's be realistic. I'm not diplomatic here at all, but let's be realistic. This is our common fault that we haven't realized the threat which came to Ukraine in 2014. And yeah, to your question, but I again forgot.
The dates when once they pass, and they will pass without membership, and when the citizens get disillusioned.
Yes,
How
about
do
the
you fight it?
financial
And
framework.
we'll know it's already by 2 years what the EU has in store for you guys. So my question to you is, how far can you go to boosting this optimism without having this as a boomerang hurting you?
I really, to be very sincere, I'm not really connect the EU integration of Ukraine with the financial framework. I will explain you why. Because if you will look into other countries which were joining the EU, a lot of countries were joining somewhere in between the financial.
Not for Croatia, that was the case, but that was so small that they could have revised the
It
MFF.
was with Poland as well. You can check. It was also somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure about, Bulgaria, Romania as well. In our case, we, when the financial framework started in 2021, we were still non-EU. So we were in the box with so-called Ndiki, where was everything, including some regions which are somewhere in Africa. To be sincere, we were shocked when we saw this framework. For us, it was a bit shocked, because previously it was the framework of the Eastern Partnership, so on. So for us, it was more clear that there are certain countries, and the distribution of the forces was more or less okay. Here was something very, very unspecific, and we were a little bit shocked about this framework. And in 2023, we start to be the candidate country. And it was a big discussion in Ukraine. We were quarreling so much in between the experts and between the government. Ukraine will have EPA. No, Ukraine cannot have EPA, because EPA is already done to 2027. No EPA at all. So it cannot happen. And we had Ukraine facility. So it was a kind of the work of analysis of consultations, and Ukraine facility actually came instead of so-called EPA. Some of the experts in Ukraine are still naming it EPA, but do not listen to them. This is Ukraine facility.
Okay, wonderful. We are way over time, so as short as possible, please.
I try to be very short on this question, gradual integration. Austria is strongly advocating, of course, this concept. We were actually inventing it, the Western Balkan Friendship Group. I have to mention here also, in the presence of colleagues managing it, also the Göttwijk Declaration, because at the last year's Europa Forum Göttwijk, there was a complete package actually prepared for this step-by-step integration of the Western Balkan countries and the accession countries, all of them. And there will be discussion on that one at the next EU Foreign Ministers meeting. So, and on, I think also on the Danube as a transport route, your question, I think also a very interesting one. I would like to say the Danube has been and will be a solidarity lane. Whenever Russia blocked the ports, you know, of the Black Sea, it was the Danube, you know, a kind of wallet, so to say, for Ukraine, bringing out and getting also goods into the country. It will be, Danube will be, for good and for bad, let's be honest and frank, it will be one of the main rivers of transport and routes of transport for reconstruction of Ukraine. We have to be aware of that, you know, whether we like it or not, it will be a fact. And then, you know, more symbolically, you know, it was one of the colleagues of Nadia the other day saying to me when the war started, Danube, because of this role, you know, has been a kind of river of life and hope for the Ukrainian people whenever these ports were blocked. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert, including the Dnipro in EUSDR, can we have a short comment on this?
Well, to start with, Ukraine is not the whole territory part of the Danube region strategy. And I guess Ukraine is not part there, so we would have a geographical problem for start. So what we would need to do is to enlarge the EUSDR for more regions. At the moment, we have 4 regions, 4 oblasts that are members of the strategy. So step 1 would be to enlarge the strategy, and step 2, then we can think about changing the names and looking into more cooperation.
And if I can add a very short message about Dnipro. We have the example when we are working with risks with the Ministry of Infrastructure in the Danube River. And of course, if we are transferring experience, nothing will stop us from transferring experience to Dnipro with the risk system, because anyhow inside Ukraine they are connected. Even if the strategy is not about Dnipro, Dnipro will gain the very clear achievements due to this cooperation in Danube River.
Wonderful. And then last question that I intended to ask to everyone, but it's now exclusive for you. At the end, in 1 year, if we meet again, sit together after the EUSDR presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, what will be the major topic that we are going to talk about?
Oh, this is tough for me to answer. I think
Never easy.
Yeah, I think security will still be quite big. But my big hope, and I'm very happy that you mentioned it before, is really issues of climate change and how we can deal with this, the flooding, not only in Bosnia but across the region. And I really also quite happy that sustainable tourism is on the point, because Bosnia has quite a lot of potential there. It's just from the region where I'm from. But yeah. I think unfortunately security is going to stay up top.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. I'm very sorry, but a big round of applause to our wonderful panel. That was fantastic. Thank you. There will be a possibility to say something at the reception in a minute, but you cannot talk about the Danube region without one very specific organization that is also here with us in the room and will show us a bit more about its activities in the region. I'm of course talking about the AG Donauländer, and I would like to welcome to the stage Simon Ortner, the head of the Department for International and European Affairs at the Lower Austrian Federal Government, and then also later on joined by Teresa Stummer, Policy Officer for International and European Affairs in the same government. Simon, please.
Thank you. So now I'm standing between you and the reception. So, but the motto of my presentation will be KISS. I will keep it short and simple. Thank you again for the invitation. First, I really would like to say thank you for the very interesting discussions we had so far, and for the input, for creating the input that I can take home with me today. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you very much. The working community of the Danube regions and the Institute of the Danube region and Central Europe can look back on a long-standing and really excellent cooperation over many years, and we are delighted to be able to demonstrate this good partnership at the Danube Conference every year. The year is coming to an end, and now I think it's time to look back on the many topics and activities that kept us busy in 2024. I would also like to take a look ahead to 2025 and show where the next chapter of our journey will take us. 2024 was a year for Austria shaped by the Danube. The takeover of the EUSDR presidency in November 2023 marked the start of an ambitious program in which many stakeholders were able to get on board. The working community of the Danube regions also made its contribution here, and I would like to use the opportunity to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Stanzel is here today, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Danube Strategy Point for the opportunity to be closely involved as a regional organization in the Austrian Presidency. Before we present some highlights from 2024, I would like to say a few words about the working community and its history for those who might not be familiar with it. When the first steps were taken towards establishing the working community of the Danube regions, Europe was deeply divided by the Iron Curtain, and Lower Austria was situated on the very edge of the West. Cooperation and exchange at that time was an extremely complicated undertaking that required a great deal of administrative work and diplomatic skill. Out of this situation, the idea of a regional network of all the Danube regions for political discussion was born. The idea was to build a framework in which, in addition to Lower Austria, Bavaria, Upper Austria, Vienna, the eastern regions of the Danube countries, the former Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, and even the Danube regions in the Soviet Union could participate. A central point was to contribute to preserving peace through regular contacts between the different stakeholders at the political and administrative level and with the civil society, in order to promote dialogue and mutual understanding. Today, the working community comprises 43 regions from 10 countries in the Danube area. 41 of these regions are permanent members. 2 of them are so-called observer states. Just like the EUSDR, it includes regions from EU member states as well as candidate countries and countries aspiring to join the European Union. In its approach, our working community of the Danube regions puts its focus on what we have in common rather than what divides us. The crisis of recent years and the ever-widening divisions in society have contributed to a climate that is characterized by extremes. An understanding across borders and cultures can maybe help prevent further escalation and maybe prevent the conflicts from spreading further to other parts of Europe. In the Danube region, both the new enlargement and the war in Ukraine are important issues. Network like ours can maybe bring regions closer to the European Union through successful cooperation. As it is clear to us that the future of Europe lies definitely in the enlargement. And now I would like to hand over to Teresa to share a few highlights of our concrete projects and to take a look at what happened over the last months within the working community of the Danube regions.
Thank you, Simon, and hello from my side as well. So I will be really the last point, I think, and I will try to keep it super short. Just a few highlights from our work in the working community. Here you can see we are part of the PA10 of the EUSDR, which deals with institutional capacities and cooperation. And in 2023, we started a project dealing with cross-border emergency healthcare. Lower Austria has here a very long-standing practice and a good expertise in this field, especially with our partners in the Czech Republic. For that, we invited the steering group members to Lower Austria for a spring meeting. And after our official part, we went to the border on to Gmünd and looked at the Health Across Med Gmünd Center, where we saw the good practice there and what it looks in real. The Health Across initiative reconciles legal, administrative, and technical and cultural aspects of border cooperation in healthcare. In doing so, it benefits from a very strong political will and dedicated partners. It contributes to the quality of people living in the cross-border area by providing them with sufficient health care. With the feedback we got, the topic was quite well received and will be further dealt with within the PA10. As well, we will also deal with it in the upcoming presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then another event we had in cooperation with the IDM was dealing with 20 years of European Eastern enlargement and EU elections, because 2024 was also a year that marked this point. In May, we had a discussion with many different stakeholders and in St. Pölten, and were able to also invite students from Lower Austria to be present there. The students were around the age of 16, which is the voting age for Austria. So it was quite refreshing to give them a bit of context on why it is important to vote in the European elections. And then there was June, and June was quite an intense time for us in the Danube community, because we had the Europa Forum Wachau and in Göttingen and the annual forum of the EUSDR in the same week taking place, so sort of in a tandem. And us as the working community tried to be present at both events. Here you can see the annual forum and our Climate and Me exhibition that we were able to show there. The exhibition is a traveling exhibition, which is in cooperation with the Austrian Sustainable and Energy Agency, the ENO, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it shows what every one of us can do in context with the climate crisis. It has these colorful roll-ups that deal with 6 topics, which are travel and mobility, electricity, energy, building and living, waste and recyclables, food and drink, and consumption and lifestyle. It has a group that is focused on more students, but it's also very interesting for adults as well. The touring exhibition has been shown in the Danube region since 2023, and now it's also reaching abroad, the Danube. We showed it at the OISARP annual forum in Brugge only recently, and we now have also some interest to show it in Spain as well. And then we had, in the framework of the Europa Forum Wachau, every year the Danube Salon that took place on the ship, the MS Dürnstein. The Danube Salon is a cooperation with the Europa Forum Wachau and the EDM and the working community. And this year we focused on female perspectives on the future of Europe. Women offer different perspectives on existing programs and therefore have a lot to contribute to positive developments in Europe and in the Danube region. And it is a goal to promote this and get more women in decision-making positions. And after the official part, as you can see, we also had a networking event with a very rich cultural and culinary offerings from the Danube region. And from culture, I come to September, where we had the 11th Danube Conference on Culture in Lower Austria. We invited the community to Krems and dealt for 2 days with important topics facing the culture community, which was regenerative cultural tourism, so again, something that will also be dealt with in the upcoming presidency, ecology and art and culture for kids, youth, and families, and also the important topic of financial resources. And in September as well, we had another conference in Lower Austria, headed by the working community, which is our conference on soil protection. So we deal here with the topic of sustainability and climate change. This conference has a long-standing tradition. It's the 31st, as you can see, and it's an opportunity for people from stakeholders like farmers, land users, scientists, and representatives from authorities and community across the Danube regions to meet, exchange, and discuss new approaches when dealing with climate change. During this time, there was also the EUSDR Priority 6 steering group meeting. So we tried to connect this throughout the whole year. And this conference is what I like about it. I mean, I'm not an expert in soil protection, but every time I'm there, I feel like it has a very optimistic and can-do approach on very dire problems we are facing concerning climate change. And now I want to share some other news. The Danube, the working community of the Danube regions has a rotating presidency that changes every 2 years. And I'm pleased to inform you that the county of Karaseverin in Romania will take over with the presidency in 2025, 2026. We already had some very fruitful discussions with them, and we will travel to Romania in the beginning of the year to talk more about what we will do in the upcoming 2 years. They're very highly motivated, so we're looking forward to cooperating with them in this field. And another thing I also want to mention, I would like to invite you to save the date for 2025. From the 11th to the 13th June, there will be the Europa Forum Wachau taking place again in Göttingen. It is a fixed point for us to discuss the future of Europe and also the Danube region. And I would be very glad to see many of you in Göttingen. Finally, I would like to say thank you to Sebastian and the whole team of the IDM for a very good year of cooperation as the ones before, and we're looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for this concise and very short presentation. Yeah, you kept the promise. Thank you very much. But also for your kind words at the end. It's mutual. It's always a pleasure to cooperate with the AG Donauländer. And therefore, I remain to say a few words of thank you, of course, to the wonderful panelists, but also the AG Donauländer for presenting here. I think a big round of applause again for everyone. But of course, also to our partners, the Europa Forum Wachau, the University for Continuing Education, the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs, and the Land Niederösterreich. Without their support, we could not organize such a conference. And of course, everyone is eager to finally get to the reception. Here we are also very glad, of course, not only that we have had the possibility to kick off our project. I think we already saw that there are discussions starting, and I'm very much looking forward to the next meetings. Here, I'm of course especially grateful to the International Visegrad Fund for providing the funds to implement this. And last but not least, of course, also I have to say thank you to my team, because I had the easiest job here. I was not involved in the planning of the conference because I was on paternity leave. So I just came here to moderate. Yeah? This is super fun and easy because you can cut off people of answering in the end. But my team has prepared this, and here especially, of course, a big thank you to Rebecca Thorne, who also manages the project. And Sophia Beiter, who is in the back here, and without her, I couldn't do it. And additionally, of course, also all the other members of the IDM. We still have a couple of more people that work for us, but I will not also name them here. This was the IDM conference. We have a long tradition of this format. We have had it in different settings. It's the second time, actually, that we do it here in this room. But the last time we did it, we didn't have a lot of wonderful people in the room because it was still the pandemic and it was all online. So I'm very happy that afterwards we can now personally stand together. I think we are ready outside there. It looks very good. Wonderful. Thumbs up from our chairman. Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. And now have some drinks.
Der Wein ist kalt.